Halitu chimichukma. All right, so what I'm about to talk about has to do with hunting, farming, the elements, our ways in which we label our creation stories, and the history of the universe from the beginning of time until now, and hopefully within about 10 minutes. So let's get started. Chutta Sia. I am a member of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. Traditionally, our people are hunters and farmers, and the sun is our deity. But you wouldn't know it from me because I don't like being outside. The sun, the heat, all of that, it makes me ill. Central heat and air, that's my preferred habitat. But recently, I've found myself learning from the indigenous peoples this concept of food sovereignty. And on this journey, I found myself at the Wazaji Nation on Bird Creek Farms. Now you can see what a disaster this would be for me, right? The sun, the heat, getting bug bites, having my hand all up in the mud, watching out for snakes. I almost passed out one time. I mean, I did mention I don't like being outside, right? But something interesting happened. It turns out I enjoy being out there on that farm. And it got me wondering, what is it that makes me feel this exhilaration? Could it be that I'm, in research they say that planting foods and having your hand in soil is ways to help boost your mental health. But I thought deeper and wondered if this affected me as a chutta. Perhaps I'm connecting with the land, or I'm connecting with my ancestors, or more than that, I'm connecting with our beginnings, creation itself. So I did some light reading and on these creation stories, and the first thing I noticed is that researchers tend to label creation stories as creation myths. So myth is kind of a loaded word. In one definition, it states that myths are traditional stories that explain natural or social phenomena. The religious historian and philosopher Mircea Eliade, he calls myth a narration of a sacred history. However, there is another definition that states that a myth is a widely held but false belief or idea. Yet, when telling their stories, they tend to call them theory. So one would imagine what the reaction would be if this was called a creation myth. Once upon a time, there was a hot, dense superforce. Then about 13.8 billion years ago, give or take a few billion years, that superforce quickly expanded. And as it expanded, the atoms were formed, and the stars, then the galaxies, and from this Big Bang, our universe began. So you can call it what you want. Call it a myth, call it theory, you can even call it mythter. But for me, and not to piss off the millions of cultures who don't see these as myths, but as history, we'll use our term, creation stories. The other thing I noticed is that when they classify these creation stories, there's no one set agreement. Some classifications go as low as 5, others go as high as 20 or more. So I wondered, what if we classify these creation stories using the elements, water, earth, air, fire, and spirit? These elements are very important in the building blocks of our universe. They're very important in our indigenous cultures. So perhaps this could be an indigenized way of classifying creation stories. So for instance, like with air, we have beings in the sky who fall, and sometimes they're pushed, and some of them even fly. There's a story of how sky came together with land, and together they created our earth. For waters, we are peoples who emerge from water, or sometimes our world begins in waters, and it takes an act, usually sacrificial, to build up the land around us. For fire, we are shaped like clay until we are passed through the flames and forged forth as human beings. And for earth, it's sometimes a being who lays on the ground and creates the land, or it's a body part. and sometimes we emerge from the earth. That is how the Chukta people began. Here's a real quick version of our creation story. We come from a mound called Naniwaya. Some call it the Mother Mound. And there were 4 groups of peoples who came from that mound. The first group to come out laid on the ground and let the sun dry their dampened bodies. And once dried, they got up and continued in their direction. The second group came out, did the same, and continued in their direction. The third group came up, did the same thing, and continued in their direction. The fourth group that came out, they laid on the ground, let the sun dry their dampened bodies, and when they got up, they chose to stay there. And we remained there for a long time until our people became many, and we decided to continue in our direction. And we continued until we came to what is present-day Mississippi. And when we got there, we saw how beautiful and abundant the land was and decided to make that place our home. We built up another mound, placed the bones of our dead in there, and that mound is still there, and we, the Chukta people, still prosper. All right, so let's fast forward from the beginning of time to more current history. So my grandfather, he had a garden that he grew just about every year. My father, he had a sometimes successful garden. I remember being a kid and going out with my mother and with a knife and a fork and digging up wild onions. And I have family members who are farmers, and I have family members who are hunters, and I've even gone hunting with them. Of course, I've not shot anything but targets, but still. I remember one time we came home from a hunt and my hookney asked, "Well, did you get anything?" And my cousin responded, "We took a few shots." And under her breath, she responded, "Yeah? Of what?" All right, so one more last thing. Research tells us that the genetics of our ancestors inform who we are today. In other words, our ancestral experiences are passed down to us. But what about the rest? If we are peoples of the elements, perhaps we are a lot closer to our creation than we think. We are peoples of the water. We are peoples of the earth. We are peoples of the air, and we are peoples of the fire. There's another element I mentioned earlier that we haven't talked about, the spirit. And the way I see it, the spirit is our secret origin. The spirit is the root that connects us to the universe, connects us to the elements, connects us to everything. And so me being on that farm, connecting with the land, connecting with my ancestors, is me reconnecting with the spirit. And that's where that exhilaration comes from. So whether we work on a farm, plant a tree, plant a garden, we're out in nature, or being with our family, being with our community, or simply just being, this is what we're doing. We're understanding that the universe is the belly that holds the ancestors. The sun is the fire in the sky that watches over us. The air is the song that sings to us. The water gives us life, and the earth is the mother that feeds and nurtures us. And the spirit that passes through the universe, passes through the elements, passes through our ancestors, passes through you, passes through me, passes through every single being. And it is through this spirit that we are all connected. Chimpisali, Chihokloli, Chikanali, Chihuloli, Yakoki.